Chamath, explain the concept of a poison pill, just generally speaking, and then give us your, because everybody knows what's going on, but like here we are in this, whatever, I don't know if this is the 7th or 8th inning of this saga, or it's the second, but where do you think we are in this saga? And then what happens on Monday? And describe a poison pill.
A poison pill is basically a defensive maneuver that a board of directors uses to prevent a hostile takeover. And basically, the simple way it works is it allows the board to create enormous amounts of new shares and effectively dilute the potential hostile acquirer so that it becomes economically unfeasible for them to get enough shares to get control. The way that they do that is that they basically give everybody except a person that crosses a certain ownership threshold. So let's use Twitter as an example. So the Twitter's poison pill basically says that if you get to 15%, you're essentially locked out from a right that then everybody else has that effectively allows them to buy another share of stock at, I think it's a 50% discount. And so what it does is it creates an incentive to essentially almost double the fully diluted shares outstanding of the business. And what that does is it makes it almost impossible for the person with 15% to then go and acquire what's necessary to get to 50%.
Yeah.
There are different kinds of poison pills. There's things that you can do with debt. There's things that you can do with equity. But that's the thing that Twitter did. I think if anybody's interested in it, Nick, maybe you can just bring it up, but you can Google on Wikipedia. There's a phenomenal article called Revlon versus McAndrew and Forbes. And McAndrew and Forbes was the holding company of this very prolific deal maker in the 70s, 80s, and 90s named Ronald Perelman. And what happened was he was the CEO of a company called Pantry Pride. And Pantry Pride made an unsolicited hostile takeover bid for Revlon, which made makeup. And basically, there was like $40 to $45 a share. The board instituted all these poison pills. The price kept escalating. Then a private equity firm stepped in, also tried to compete for the asset. All along the way, there was enough shenanigans that essentially what Ronald Perelman did was sue Revlon, which went to Delaware court. And from it basically came the current framework of law that we use in this situation. And basically what it means is that board directors have these fiduciary obligations to their shareholders. And in some cases, these are very broad fiduciary obligations, meaning do the right thing. But in some really narrow circumstances, all of that collapses and their sole focus is to get the best price. And what a director and a board of directors typically wants to do in a situation like this is not end up in that second bucket. They want to keep all their options available. They don't necessarily want to sell to one person. They're probably going to assume they're going to get fired from the board. They want to stay on for different reasons, et cetera, et cetera. And so right now, what Twitter and their advisors are trying to do is basically stay in that first bucket, have all of the options available to them and not be forced to run an auction. And I think what Elon will try to do is essentially use the public pressure that's going to build and the existing shareholders who own stock at 40 some odd dollars, a chance to basically get, a 20% payday by selling it to Elon for $54 or 53, whatever the price was. And the Twitter board now will have to justify how whatever they come up with is better than this. Because then if they don't, and they're still exercising this broad fiduciary obligations, one thing I'll tell you as a public company director, it is a horrendous process when you get sued, and these guys will be in court for years. And the incremental pressure that this Twitter board has is that they can be held personally liable here. So I think it's getting very complicated very quickly.
Okay, on that note of personal liability, you have director's insurance. So how can that pierce through?
Doesn't cover it.
Have there been examples of this happening?
Yeah, D&O insurance is kind of like, D&O insurance is their director and officer insurance is a layer of protection that we all have as public company directors. We actually also have it as private company directors.
Sure, yeah.
But the amount of coverage changes. But what I'll tell you is D&O coverage tends to be relatively nominal because the risk profile doesn't really include these kinds of tail events. And now what you're talking about is $10 to $15 billion of equity value that's going to either get created for existing shareholders or get taken away. And typically what courts will do is that they will look at the amount of money and they will start to think about, compensatory and punitive damages as a function of how much money was made or lost. And so you're talking about a realm of risk now for these directors that's well beyond what D&O insurance will cover. So
if a lawsuit did happen, Chamath, you have to find damages. So if the board found a better offer, great. But if this thing goes down on Monday, Elon sells his shares and it goes down to 30, now you have the opposite effect